The episode unfolding on April 8th does not begin with chaos, but with something far more unsettling, a quiet, suffocating tension that lingers in the air long after the confrontation between Sheila Carter and Deacon Sharp has stripped away every illusion they once clung to. What makes this moment so devastating is not the revelation itself, but the inevitability behind it. Sheila has already heard fragments of the truth from Taylor Hayes, already sensed a shift in Deacon long before he found the courage to speak it aloud. Yet there is a difference between suspicion and confirmation, between fearing the collapse of something fragile and watching it finally shatter in real time. And as Sheila stands there, forcing Deacon to confront what he has tried so desperately to deny, the scene transforms into something far more than a confession. It becomes a reckoning with identity, with the past, and with the impossible question of whether a person like her is truly capable of change. Sheila does not approach Deacon as the volatile, explosive figure everyone expects her to be. Instead, she is deliberate, almost painfully controlled, as though she understands that one wrong move, one hint of the old instability, will only reinforce the narrative that has followed her for years. But that restraint is not peace, it is pressure. Every word she pulls from Deacon feels like it is dragged through layers of denial, resistance, and guilt. She does not simply want to know if he has betrayed her. She needs to understand why, needs to hear him articulate the truth in a way that makes sense of the emotional distance she has been feeling but cannot fully explain. Her insistence is not rooted in cruelty, but in desperation. Because if she can understand it, if she can map the exact moment where everything went wrong, then maybe, just maybe, there is still something she can salvage. But Deacon cannot offer her that comfort. His confession, when it finally comes, is not dramatic or explosive. It is quiet, almost resigned, as though he has already lived through the consequences in his mind long before speaking them aloud. He admits what Sheila already knows, that his connection with Taylor is real, that it has grown beyond something fleeting or accidental, and that despite his attempts to deny it, to push it away, it has taken root in a way that cannot be undone. What makes his words so devastating is not just their honesty, but the clarity behind them. There is no ambiguity left, no room for reinterpretation or hope. He does not speak as someone confused or conflicted. He speaks as someone who has made a choice. And that choice is what ultimately breaks Sheila. Because in that moment, she is forced to confront a truth that no amount of control or restraint can soften. Love, unlike fear, cannot be forced into submission. She cannot manipulate it, cannot outmaneuver it, cannot will it back into existence through sheer determination. For perhaps the first time, Sheila understands that the power she once wielded so effectively, through intimidation, through unpredictability, through the sheer force of her presence, means nothing in the face of genuine emotional detachment. Deacon is not leaving her because he is afraid or manipulated. He is leaving because he no longer feels what she needs him to feel. And that realization cuts deeper than any betrayal ever could. Deacon, for his part, does not emerge from this confrontation unscathed. His regret is genuine, woven into every word he speaks, every hesitation that lingers between his sentences. He knows that he is hurting Sheila, knows that his honesty is a blade that cannot be dulled once it is drawn. But there is also a quiet resolve within him, a recognition that continuing the illusion would only prolong the inevitable. By standing beside Taylor's claim, by affirming that their connection is not only real but something they both want to pursue, he is choosing a future that feels more stable, more grounded, even if it comes at the cost of devastating someone who, in her own complicated way, has tried to become better because of him. As the weight of his words settles, Sheila reaches a point of clarity that is both heartbreaking and strangely dignified. She understands that there is nothing left to fight for, nothing she can do to reverse what has already taken hold. The marriage she once believed could anchor her, could redefine her, slips through her grasp not with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet, irreversible finality. And in that stillness, she is left alone with a question that has haunted her for years. If she is no longer the person she used to be, if she has truly changed, Then why does she still end up here? Abandoned, misunderstood, and standing on the edge of something dark and familiar? Deacon cannot ignore that question, even as he steps away from her. His concern for what Sheila might do next lingers, unspoken but impossible to dismiss. He knows her history, knows the patterns that have defined her, the way pain can twist into something destructive if left unchecked. And so he asks, not out of suspicion, but out of fear. Fear for her, fear for everyone connected to her, fear that this moment, as controlled as it has been, could still spiral into something irreversible. But Sheila's response is not what he expects. She acknowledges the truth of who she used to be, does not deny the darkness that once defined her actions. Yet she insists, with a quiet conviction that feels almost fragile, that she is no longer that person. It is not a declaration meant to convince him. It is something she seems to be telling herself, as though repeating it might make it real. While this emotional collapse unfolds in private, its echoes ripple outward, reaching those who have long been entangled in Sheila's orbit. Hope Logan and Deke Sharp remain consumed by worry, their concern for Deacon colored by a deep distrust of Sheila's ability to change. They want him to walk away cleanly, to sever all ties and protect himself from the potential consequences of her instability. Yet beneath their urgency lies a lack of understanding, a failure to grasp that this situation cannot be resolved through simple distance or decisive action. Their fear simplifies Sheila into a single, unchanging threat, ignoring the complexity of what is actually unfolding. And in doing so, they risk pushing Deacon into decisions that are driven more by external pressure than by internal clarity. At the same time, a different kind of response is taking shape among those who have always seen Sheila as an irredeemable danger. Steffi Forrester, John Finnegan, and Ridge Forrester are not waiting for proof, not waiting for confirmation of wrongdoing. For them, the mere possibility of Sheila's involvement in something threatening is enough to justify action. When Taylor returns, shaken by her encounter, admitting that she felt cornered, that fear crept in despite the absence of actual harm, it becomes the catalyst they have been waiting for. Her fear validates theirs, reinforces the belief that Sheila's restraint is temporary, that beneath the surface, the same danger still exists, waiting for the right moment to emerge. What follows is not a measured response, but a collective tightening of control, a determination to protect at any cost. Steffi, in particular, refuses to let her guard down, her instincts sharpened by years of experience with Sheila's unpredictability. For her, the idea that Sheila could change is not just unlikely, it is unacceptable, because accepting that possibility would mean confronting the ways in which her own actions, her own judgments, might need to evolve as well. And that is a risk she is not willing to take. Ridge and Finn mirror that intensity, their focus narrowing to a single objective: ensure that Sheila cannot pose a threat, regardless of whether that threat has actually materialized. And so the narrative begins to split into two parallel paths, one defined by personal heartbreak and quiet introspection, the other by fear, control, and preemptive action. Sheila stands at the intersection of these paths, caught between the person she has been and the person she claims to be becoming. Her pain is real, her restraint undeniable, yet the shadow of her past looms too large to be ignored by those who have suffered because of her. The question that lingers, heavy and unresolved, is not simply whether Sheila can change, but whether anyone around her is willing to believe that she can. Because belief, in this world, is as powerful as truth. And without it, even the most genuine transformation risks being dismissed as temporary, as fragile, as something that will inevitably collapse under pressure. As the episode moves forward, that tension continues to build, not through dramatic explosions, but through the quiet accumulation of doubt, fear, and unresolved emotion. Every conversation, every decision, every moment of hesitation adds another layer to a story that refuses to settle into clear definitions of right and wrong. In the end, what unfolds is not just a story about betrayal or heartbreak, but about the limits of redemption in a world that has already decided who you are. Sheila's journey, as uncertain as it is, forces every character around her to confront their own assumptions, their own willingness, or refusal, to see beyond the past. And as those assumptions harden into action, the stage is set for a conflict that may not be defined by what Sheila does next, but by how far others are willing to go to stop her from ever having the chance to prove that she has truly changed. The episode, airing on April 8th, promises to unfold like a quiet storm that refuses to announce itself with chaos, but instead creeps in through the unsettling calm left behind when Sheila Carter does not spiral into madness, as everyone expects. In a world where her instability has long been the excuse, the weapon, and the justification for fear, her restraint becomes something far more dangerous. It creates a vacuum, a space where uncertainty thrives, where those who have built their lives around anticipating her next breakdown are suddenly left without a script. And in that uncertainty, the real fractures begin to show, not within Sheila, but within those who claim to be protecting themselves from her. At the center of that unraveling stand Ridge Forrester, Steffi Forrester, and John Finnegan, whose instinct is not to pause, not to question, but to run. Their retreat is not just physical, it is emotional, almost primal. They are not fleeing from what Sheila has done, but from what she might do, from the ghost of every past action that still echoes louder than any present truth. In their minds, safety is not defined by evidence but by distance, and so they move as though danger is inevitable, as though the past has already written the future. Yet beneath that urgency lies something more fragile, a refusal to accept that their fear may no longer be justified in the way it once was. To admit that would mean confronting the possibility that their hatred has outlived its cause, that their need to control the narrative around Sheila has become less about protection and more about preserving their own sense of moral certainty. Ridge, driven by a need to act, to assert control over a situation that refuses to behave predictably, will likely turn to the law. The decision to call the police is not merely procedural, it is symbolic. It is his way of restoring order in a world that has begun to feel dangerously ambiguous. But the irony is impossible to ignore. If Sheila has committed no crime, then the law becomes a tool not of justice, but of fear. The attempt to force her into a box labeled criminal reveals more about Ridge's internal conflict than about Sheila's actions. He is not responding to what is happening, but to what he believes must be happening, because anything else would dismantle years of carefully constructed belief. Beside him, Steffi's reaction burns even hotter, more immediate, more emotional. Her call to Taylor Hayes is not just about checking on safety, it is about validation. She needs to hear that Taylor is unharmed, that nothing terrible has occurred, because only then can she pivot back to the narrative she understands best, that Sheila is dangerous and must be stopped. But what happens when Taylor confirms that she was not harmed? What happens when the expected horror fails to materialize? That is the moment where Steffi's certainty begins to crack, and instead of embracing that uncertainty, she doubles down. The instinct to push Sheila toward imprisonment, to find any charge that will stick, even something as minor as trespassing, becomes a desperate attempt to restore a sense of control. It is not about justice anymore. It is about preserving a worldview that no longer fits neatly with reality. Taylor herself becomes an unexpected axis in this shifting dynamic. Her acknowledgement that Sheila did not harm her introduces a complication that no one is prepared to handle. In a narrative built on clear lines between victim and villain, her calm disrupts everything. And yet, even she may find herself pulled into the same gravitational field of fear and convenience. Because aligning with Ridge and Steffi, even against her own experience, offers a simpler path than standing alone in ambiguity. It is easier to agree, to let the machinery of accusation move forward, than to challenge it and risk becoming isolated. In that sense, Taylor's position is not one of clarity, but of quiet conflict, a tension between what she knows and what she feels compelled to support. While this storm brews among those determined to define Sheila as a threat, another, more intimate conflict unfolds between Deacon Sharp and Sheila herself. Their relationship, once built on the fragile hope of transformation, now stands at a crossroads that feels both inevitable and heartbreaking. Sheila, for perhaps the first time in a long while, is not driven by chaos but by desire, by a genuine longing to hold onto something stable, something real. Her love for Deacon is not performative. It is anchored in the belief that he has helped her become someone better, someone capable of change. And that belief, fragile as it is, becomes the most humanizing aspect of her character. But Deacon stands on the other side of that fragile hope, weighed down by a different kind of realization. His connection to Taylor, his desire for a life that feels less complicated, less shadowed by the past, pulls him away from Sheila in ways that words alone cannot soften. His willingness to break her heart is not born out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. He understands, perhaps better than anyone, the cost of being tied to Sheila's history, the constant vigilance it demands, the way it shapes every interaction, every possibility for the future. And so, when he chooses to step away, he is not just ending a relationship, he's choosing a version of himself that no longer revolves around managing chaos. Yet, that choice is not without consequence. Because Sheila, even in her restraint, is still Sheila. The potential for her anger, her pain, to twist into something darker lingers just beneath the surface. The conversation between them is not just difficult, it is volatile in a way that defies prediction. Her desire to hold on clashes violently with his need to let go, creating a tension that feels like it could tip in any direction. And what makes it even more compelling is the uncertainty of Taylor's role in all of this. If Deacon is leaving Sheila for Taylor, does Taylor even want to step into that space after her own encounter with Sheila? Or does that encounter leave her questioning everything, including the assumptions she once held so firmly? On the periphery, Hope Logan and Deke Sharp watch these events unfold with a mixture of concern and unintended complicity. Their worry for Deacon is genuine, rooted in love and fear, but it is also tangled with their own choices. By pushing him, by encouraging him to confront a situation that is inherently unstable, they've helped set the stage for the conflict now playing out. And yet, there is a sense that they have not fully grasped the weight of what they have done. Their concern does not translate into reflection. It remains surface level, reactive rather than introspective. That lack of reflection becomes particularly striking when viewed alongside the looming possibility of renewed conflict between Hope and Steffi. Their history is already layered with tension, rivalry, and unresolved grievances, and this situation threatens to reignite all of it. But before that confrontation can fully take shape, there is a quieter, more fundamental lesson waiting to be learned, one that neither side seems ready to embrace. The idea that actions have consequences, that pushing others into volatile situations can create outcomes beyond their control, is a lesson that requires humility, and humility is in short supply. What makes this entire narrative so compelling is not the presence of a clear villain, but the absence of one. Sheila's restraint removes the easy answers, forcing every character to confront their own motivations, their own fears, and the ways in which they contribute to the chaos they claim to be escaping. Ridge and Steffi's determination to punish her reveals their dependence on a simplified version of reality. Taylor's conflicted position highlights the difficulty of standing by truth when it complicates loyalty. Deacon's choice exposes the painful necessity of letting go, even when it means hurting someone who has, in her own way, tried to change. And Hope and Deke's concern underscores the unintended consequences of ing in situations they do not fully understand. In the end, the question is not whether Sheila will be punished, or whether Deacon will leave, or whether Ridge and Steffi will succeed in forcing their version of justice onto the situation. The real question is whether any of them will recognize the patterns they are trapped in, the ways in which their actions are driven not by the present, but by a past they have never truly processed. Because without that recognition, the cycle will continue, repeating itself in different forms, with different justifications, but always leading back to the same place, a world where fear dictates action, where assumptions override truth, and where the possibility of change, no matter how
Oh,